Welcome back to Games with Dad. I'm your host, Dad, and this month we're taking a break from the 90s, instead moving forward to the early 2000s, and today we're talking about another very special game. This was the first game of the new millennium to really just blow my mind. It stuck with me even though I didn't own the console it was on until 3 years after it came out. A game that thrusted myself and countless other millennials into what is now one of today's most dominant gaming genres, the first-person shooter. Today we're looking at Halo Combat Evolved. When it launched alongside the original Xbox in November of 2001, Halo was the game to get. It single-handedly put Microsoft's new console on the map. If there was ever a definite game that you would associate with a console or even an entire brand, Halo is it. There will be no Xbox today without Halo, full stop. So let's set the stage. It's Christmas of 2001. I had bought a Game Boy Advance on launch day back in June of that year, so getting one of the new consoles, and I was still very much a Nintendo kid at the time, was out of the question. And honestly, I was fine with that until Super Smash Bros. Melee came out that December, and that's when I really started jonesing for that next-gen experience. But the Xbox just wasn't on my radar. Christmas Day came and went, and I didn't get a shiny new GameCube, but I did get a few more Game Boy Advance games and some neato Harry Potter swag. So during that time, it was customary to go up to my grandparents' farm for the holidays. So along with the goodies I opened, my parents also gave me a GamePro magazine to read along the 3.5-hour journey. And that magazine was the first time I had heard about Halo, and it was very interesting, although I was honestly more interested in Luigi's Mansion and the new Star Wars Rogue Squadron sequel. So after I returned home, I went over to my next door neighbor Matt's house, and to let you guys know, Matt always had the coolest games. Matt's house was the first place I played a Dreamcast, a Nintendo 64, and now that he'd received one for Christmas, Microsoft's new Xbox. So I run up to his room after his mom lets me in, and he gets this look in his eye, looks over and asks me, "Hey, you want to play Halo?" And let me tell you, that afternoon blew my mind. I had played first-person shooters before. I mean, hell, I basically pulled an all-nighter on my 10th birthday playing GoldenEye with my Mountain Dew-fueled 4th grader compadres. But this was new. You had to use 2 sticks. The Master Chief can pick up any gun that he finds, use it as a melee weapon, throw grenades further than my boy Patrick Mahomes, and he can jump higher than any person in a giant suit of armor really has any right to. And you'll need all of these abilities in the fight against the Covenant. So what makes these enemies so fearsome isn't just the cool art design, but the clever use of AI. You see, in most shooters from that era other than Half-Life, most baddies did 2 things: walk towards you and attack. In Halo, the Covenant will bark orders, flank you, throw grenades, get upset if you best them in combat, panic if you stick them with a grenade, and even get scared if you take out one of their leaders. This isn't like Doom where you can just circle strafe around a group of enemies while taking pot shots. You need to make split-second decisions on when you should hang back, try to thin the enemy out, flank the enemy, throw a grenade to flush them out, or close the distance in melee. To add to the complexity of the sandbox, you don't have access to the full arsenal at all times. Chief is a burly dude, but he can only realistically carry 2 weapons at a time, which again is another decision you have to make. Do you stick with the tried and true combo of the Magnum and the assault rifle? Do you pick up that plasma pistol to help you take down elites quicker? Or do you grab the sniper rifle and rocket launcher because you're a strong, independent Master Chief that don't need no Magnum? These minute-to-minute decisions, along with the freeform style of combat, is what made Halo so addictive and has kept me coming back for the past 20 years. Oh my god, I'm so sad saying that out loud. So the story is as follows. It's the year 25, who cares? The human race is locked in a battle with an alien conglomerate known as the Covenant, and it's not going well. The humans just lost their biggest military planet outside of Earth, the planet Reach. While running away from this planet, Captain Jacooooob and his crew on the Pillar of Autumn stumble upon this weird ring planet. The ship's onboard AI Cortana lets everyone know that the Covenant followed them here, and they aren't particularly happy. So the Captain and Cortana decide to wake you up, and the game begins. The Pillar of Autumn, the first level, begins with you figuring out the controls in the cryo bay before things start hitting the fan. You eventually work your way to Captain Keyes. He tells you to grab Cortana and to try and get off the ship. He also gives us an unloaded pistol, And hey, Jakey boy, why isn't this thing loaded? We're at war and you just decide to carry a gun with no ammo? Do you like having an extra 10 pounds of dead weight on you at all times? Anyways, the Pillar of Autumn is a good tutorial and gives you enough space to get familiar with the game's mechanics. And the layout is simple enough that your starry-eyed 11-year-old dad was able to stumble through it without too many issues. So we find one of the last lifeboats and book it to the ring world. So Chief refused to buckle up on the way down. There's a crash landing, and when Chief comes to, there's blood everywhere and everyone's dead.
At last. Are you alright?
Cortana doesn't mention that it was probably because he pinballed around the cabin, but this level Halo is when Bungie really pulls back the curtain. The level is absolutely massive. It was on a scale that I'd never seen before. There are these massive mountains, incredible ravines, one of gaming's greatest skyboxes, and rock trees, because it was 2001 and making good-looking 3D trees was still hard, I guess. You meet up with some more Marines, call for some evac for them, and see more escape pods coming down nearby. The Pelican evac dropship drops off a Warthog, and oh yeah, this game has some sweet vehicles you get to play with. So you load up with 2 of your Marine buddies and head out. You find a massive cave structure that looks alien but not like anything the Covenant has built. You emerge from the other side and the game lets you choose where to go next. We have 3 groups you have to go and save, and no matter what order we save the rest of the Marines in, we eventually get on a Pelican where Cortana plays good news, bad news. Good news is they found Captain Keyes. Bad news is that the Covenant captured him and now we get to go storm a Covenant cruiser to get him back. Truth and Reconciliation starts off with a Pelican dropping us and a squad of Marines just out of sight of the Covenant. We also get loaded up with a sniper rifle and more rounds than we can normally carry, so it's time for some sneaky cheeky breaky. So you sneakily, or not so sneakily, your choice, make your way to the gravity lift underneath the cruiser. So the mission's over, right? Nope, you've got to make your way through the weird purpley bowels of the Covenant cruiser, past squads of elites, through the hangar bay, past the main bridge, until you get to the brig. You free the captain, him and his buddies pick up weapons from the dead Covenant guard, and you run back to the rest of the Marines. A few totally not conspicuous floating energy swords, and an Aliens reference, later.
Great! Now we're trapped here! We're screwed!
Captain Keyes suddenly realizes that he can fly a Covenant dropship, so we commit Grand Theft Auto, crush a couple of hunters, and head back to the base.
Nice one, sir!
Time for a little payback.
So while the captain was locked up, he overheard some of the Covenant talk about how Halo was a super weapon and that the Covenant were trying to use it against the humans. So we need to find out where the control room is to stop them. Unfortunately, there isn't really like a Halo mall directly anywhere, but there is a map room on an island not too far away. So 2 Pelicans are loaded up with troops and you storm a Covenant-controlled beach. This is one of the highlights of the entire series as a whole and definitely one of my favorite levels. So, after you storm the beach, you can try and find the map room, have the Covenant lock you out, go to the other side of the island to unlock that door, then come back, or you can go straight to the unlocked side of the island and then go to the other side without needing to backtrack. You even get different dialogue for doing that part first. So you fight your way through the facility beneath the island and find the cartographer room. The Covenant immediately launch a counterattack, wipe out the rest of your Marine buddies, and now they're coming for you. But if you're like me, you somehow managed to get a Warthog inside the map building, and in the internal struggle of Covenant versus big stonking tires, the Warthog usually wins. So we get back into the Pelican and Cortana tells the pilot Fohammer that Halo has a series of large underground tunnels that connect everything together, so why not use that to get to the control room?
The last thing the Covenant will expect is an aerial insertion from underground.
So we follow up the quintessential classic Halo level with my second favorite Halo level, Assault on the Control Room. It starts off with something the Covenant would never expect, an aerial insertion underground. This mission is quite lengthy, but has a little bit of everything in it. There's well-paced combat, stealth sections, fights with the hunters, a tank, and if you're quick enough, a flyable Covenant Banshee. Again, the level does run a bit long in the tooth, but it's solid action through and through. You can skip the last part of the level if you hijack that Banshee too. In fact, I've never actually played the section after the Banshees where you have to scale the control room building until playing through the game again for this review. So you get to the control room, Cortana plugs herself into Halo systems and immediately tells you to book it for Captain Keyes, who has been out of radio contact since the end of the Silent Cartographer. Chief asks no questions and books it for the swamps on the other side of the ring. 343 Guilty Spark starts off Halo's infamous second half. Your search for the captain brings you to the site of a wrecked Pelican, a lot of panicked grunts and jackals, a disturbing amount of blood, and a very distressed Marine, before you come across a dead body behind a seemingly locked door. Chief finds a video file that shows the captain's squad getting overwhelmed by an alien force that is definitely not the Covenant. The video stops and you are immediately ambushed by the same enemy force, the Flood. The Flood is the third faction in Halo, and instead of having their own weapons and technology, they take over their hosts. They're the galaxy's worst parasite, and the Covenant have accidentally released them from their cage. So you fight your way back out of the facility, group up with some Marines, and head for the pickup area, only for this floating blue orb and his robot buddies to pop up out of nowhere and start fighting the Flood. It turns out that Mr. Blue here is actually called 343 Guilty Spark. He talks about how the Covenant has unleashed the Flood, you are the Reclaimer, and you have to come with him to stop everything. Chief is just evidently cool with all this and goes with him.
This way.
Chief, I've lost your signal! Where'd you go? Chief! Chief!
I hate the library. And according to the internet, I'm not in the minority. So here's the library in a nutshell. Kill 200 Flood, avoid the Flood with rocket launchers, wait for Guilty Spark to open a door, and then ride an elevator. Got that? Now do it again 3 more times! If it weren't for the addition of the shotgun to the arsenal, this would be an even worse slog to get through. This level really makes you understand why they're called the Flood, because they are absolutely overwhelming at points. You get 4 floors of constantly moving to avoid getting cornered or getting a rocket to the face until you reach the index. Then R2-D2 here yanks it away from you and takes you back to the control room. So you get back to the control room and try to use the index to activate Halo, but something's wrong. Cortana shows up and is now big mad. She explains that Halo doesn't kill the Flood, it kills their food. Human, Covenant, everything. And I guess Guilty Spark just assumed that you would know that. He immediately turns his Sentinel buddies on you, and now you have to stop him from firing off Halo. And look! The Covenant are back! You guys remember the Covenant and how they're actually fun to fight because they don't just sprint at you while shooting? So it turns out, you need to destroy 3 generators close by the control room to stop the ring from firing. So you go back through the same level you played through just an hour ago, except this time you get to fight the Flood, the Covenant, and Sentinels. At least the different factions fight each other, and you get to fly Banshees around more. I always like the end of the level where you have these Covenant that are completely cut off from the rest of the fleet, and you get to just sit there and watch their heroic last stand. Or you can get bored like me and try and bum rush the last Banshee and die over and over again. So you blow up the last generator and Cortana has a plan to destroy Halo and all the Flood on it. It's simple. We turn the Pillar of Autumn into a nuke. But to do that, we need Captain Keyes' neural implants. Luckily, Cortana figured out how Guilty Spark teleports and figures that we can probably do it without dying. Probably.
Needless to say, I think we should only try this once.
Do it.
So we're back on the Truth and Reconciliation, and good news! Our guts are still intact. Remember how I said I hated the library? Yeah, well, Keyes is still my least favorite level. You have tons of Flood in cramped corridors, some of which don't stop spawning until you reach a certain point, And once again, we're playing some of a level that we've already gone through once before in the Truth and Reconciliation. You end up having to jump off the ship into some reactor fluid and have to fight your way all the way back up to the ship, and eventually you find Captain Keyes in the bridge, except he's been completely consumed by the flood. You hesitate, but eventually decide to dig the implants out of his head.
We can't let the flood get off this ring. You know what he'd expect. What he'd want us to do.
Welcome! Punch!
That's gonna leave a mark. You are immediately ambushed by the flood and then ambushed again by some Covenant Spec Ops, and the Spec Ops are no joke. The Grunts carry fuel rod guns similar to what the Hunters use, and they explode after the Grunts die. You either fight your way back down to the hangar floor, or I'm gonna do what's called a pro gamer move. And jump down to the bottom and steal a Banshee out from underneath the Covenant's nose. You scream out of the hangar and set a course for the Pillar of Autumn. We're in the endgame now. Like the last handful of maps, the Maw is a retread of the first map, the Pillar of Autumn, but thanks to some neat additions, I actually consider it in the top half of the levels in the original Halo. You crash your Banshee onto the Pillar of Autumn, and the gang is all here! Covenant Spec Ops are here to make sure that you don't blow up their sacred ring, the Flood want a way to get off the planet, and the Sentinels are here to take the Index back and fire Halo. So it's our job to make sure none of those things happen. So we get to the bridge and try to plug in Captain Keyes' self-destruct codes, and
I think that's out of the question, really.
Oh, hell.
Ridiculous! That you would imbue a warship's AI with such a wealth of knowledge? Weren't you worried it might be captured or destroyed?
343 has shut down the self-destruct sequence, so we're going to have to do things the old-fashioned way. Yep, nothing a few rockets into an exhaust coupling can't fix. Eat your heart out, Luke Skywalker. So shooting rockets at the reactor shielding makes everything start to go critical, surprisingly. We take the world's longest elevator up to the Warthog Bay, and oh boy, maybe we should have shown a little more restraint, because things are getting a little more explodey sooner than we expected. We call for evac, jump into a Warthog, and book it to the rendezvous point. This is the Warthog Run. Beloved by many, I also love it, even though I typically flip the Warthog once or twice. Not this time though, because I'm a professional. So with our foot to the floor, we eventually make it to the LZ with time to spare, but Foehammer's being chased by two Banshees. She gets shot down, and now we have even less time to get to the hangar where Cortana says there's one fighter left docked. So we make it to the hangar in time, but have to go it on foot for the last stretch. Both the Flood and the Covenant are chasing you. The Autumn is going critical all around us. We just barely make it out in time. The Autumn goes critical. It blows a chunk out of Halo, which smashes the rest of the ring to bits. There's nothing left but dust and echoes. We saved the galaxy, but all your comrades are dead, and the fight against the Covenant isn't over, because we haven't even talked about the multiplayer yet! So the campaign was really good for its time, but the real reason that Halo exploded in popularity was the multiplayer. This was back in 2001. Online gaming was very much a thing, but not really something that had really caught on in the mainstream quite yet. Instead, it was actually much more popular to link up a bunch of systems together via LAN or local area network. For Halo, you could hook up to 4 Xboxes with 4 people on each, so 16 players all at once, and it was glorious. I went to a handful of LAN parties back in my middle school, high school days with my buddy Matt, and there is still nothing quite like getting a ridiculous kill and then hearing someone else in another room yell out, "Oh, come on, man!" I even managed to get your Uncle Joe into it now that Halo got re-released on PC. Sure, some of the maps aren't very good and the pistol is just way too good. Just use the pistol, there's no reason to use any other gun. But that doesn't matter. You had fun game types like Capture the Flag, Oddball, and King of the Hill alongside the standard deathmatch game type Slayer. Oh, and the announcer in Halo was awesome. You don't see it very often nowadays, but it was very much a thing back in the 90s and early 2000s to have an announcer yell at your accomplishments to hype you up, and oh, did it make pulling off crazy streaks that much more rewarding. My last Halo LAN wasn't even that long ago. I actually went to one about a month or so after your mom and I found out that she was pregnant with you. So at the end of the day, what are my takeaways from Halo? What can I pass on to future generations? Lesson 1. Everything's better with friends. Like most games, Halo is better with a buddy or two, or 15. Things like the Warthog are specifically made to get you, your buddies, and even random strangers together and to try and cooperate. I made a ton of friends back in the day just playing Halo, and pulling off these ridiculous kill streaks is so much more fun with your buddies helping you and hyping you up along the way. Lesson 2. Game music is more than just beeps and boops. The Halo soundtrack was one of the first to make me sit back and re-examine how music can really help build an atmosphere. Marty O'Donnell and Michael Salvatore blew everyone's minds so hard that for the first time that I can remember, people actively bought the soundtrack to a friggin' video game. Tracks like Brothers in Arms, A Walk in the Woods, and of course the Halo theme stand the test of time, and I never skip them when they randomly show up in my playlists. Lesson 3. It's good to be back. The rose-tinted glasses of nostalgia will always be appealing, but in my case, I really do love this game. I certainly don't think it's the best game of all time, it's not even the best Halo game, but on its own, I really do think Halo is just as fun to play today as it was back when I first picked up an Xbox Duke controller in December of 2001. I have a yearly tradition that whenever we get our first snowfall, I'll boot up Halo and run through the assault in the control room. There's something about playing to that level all bundled up with a nice hot drink that really puts me at peace. And lastly, how did that Warthog get there?
Oh shit. I don't know that many grenades. Oh, hi!
So thanks again for watching Games with Dad. I hope you enjoyed this month's video. If you did, please feel to like the video and subscribe for more content. Sorry my voice is a little weird this month. I'm recovering from something. I'm not sure if it's COVID because it's been like 10 days since my test and they still haven't given me my results back. But that's show business, baby! Let me know in the comments below what your favorite Halo memories are or what your favorite Halo game is. I'll see you guys next time. I've been Dad, and thanks again for watching Games with Dad.